complete YouTube script. Student called dumb fails 3 times. Graduates as 100 business leaders stand in ovation. 30-second teaser, what happens when everyone calls you too dumb to succeed? When teachers write you off and classmates mock your dreams. When you fail not once, not twice, but 3 times. Most people would quit. Most people would accept that maybe everyone else was right. But sometimes, just sometimes, the person everyone counted out becomes the one everyone stands up for. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a student who was labeled dumb, who failed 3 times, and who walked across that graduation stage while 100 business leaders rose to their feet in thunderous applause. It's a story about the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations. It's about discovering that being called dumb doesn't make you dumb. And it's about the moment when your greatest critics become your loudest champions. If you've ever been told you're not smart enough, not good enough, or not worthy enough, this story will change how you see yourself forever. So hit that like button, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and drop a comment telling me about a time someone underestimated you. Because this story proves that sometimes the longest journey leads to the sweetest victory. Let me take you back to a small college town in Ohio, where Marcus Chun first walked through the doors of Central State University with dreams bigger than his bank account and determination stronger than his test scores. Marcus wasn't your typical college student. He didn't come from money. His parents, Helen and David Chun, worked double shifts at the local Riverside manufacturing plant just to afford his tuition. His SAT scores weren't impressive, hovering around the 25th percentile. His high school grades were mediocre at best, a collection of C's and D's that barely qualified him for admission. But Marcus had something that couldn't be measured on any standardized test, an unshakable belief that education could change his life. The Chun family had immigrated to America when Marcus was 8 years old. His parents spoke broken English and worked in jobs that required more of their bodies than their minds. But they carried within them the immigrant dream that their children would have opportunities they never did. Every dollar they saved for Marcus's education came at the cost of a small luxury they couldn't afford. Every sacrifice they made was an investment in a future they could barely imagine but desperately believed in. From day one at Central State University, Marcus struggled in ways that went far beyond typical freshman adjustment challenges. While other students seemed to grasp complex concepts effortlessly during lectures, Marcus had to study twice as hard just to understand the basic terminology. He'd spend hours in the library, reading the same chapter over and over until the words finally made sense, taking notes in margins, creating flashcards, and desperately trying to bridge the gap between his determination and his academic preparation. His professors noticed his struggles immediately, but instead of offering encouragement or additional support, many of them seemed to view Marcus as a lost cause, another underprepared student who had somehow slipped through an admissions process that should have weeded him out earlier. The university was focused on maintaining its reputation and graduation rates, and students like Marcus represented potential statistics that could hurt those carefully maintained numbers. Dr. Peterson, his economics professor, was particularly harsh in his assessment. Dr. Peterson was a man in his early 60s who had spent 3 decades teaching at Central State University. He had seen thousands of students pass through his classroom, and he prided himself on his ability to identify which students would succeed and which would fail. During Marcus's first semester, after a particularly poor performance on a midterm exam, Dr. Peterson pulled him aside after class and delivered words that would echo in Marcus's mind for years to come. "Son," Dr. Peterson said, adjusting his glasses and speaking in the patient but condescending tone reserved for delivering bad news, "I've been teaching for 30 years, and I can tell you right now that some people just aren't cut out for higher education. You might want to consider a trade school or community college. There's no shame in admitting that a 4-year university isn't for everyone. In fact, it takes wisdom to recognize your limitations early rather than wasting time and money pursuing something that's beyond your capabilities." Those words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and his throat tighten with emotion as he struggled to maintain his composure. The other students filing out of the classroom seemed to move in slow motion around him as Dr. Peterson's assessment settled into his consciousness. Here was a respected professor, someone with decades of experience evaluating student potential, telling him in no uncertain terms that he didn't belong in higher education. But instead of crushing his spirit entirely, those words ignited something fierce and defiant inside Marcus. That night, alone in his cramped dorm room, Marcus called his mother. Tears streamed down his face as he recounted the conversation with Dr. Peterson, his voice breaking as he repeated the professor's suggestion that he consider trade school. His mother, Helen Chun, listened quietly on the other end of the line. Helen was a woman who had cleaned office buildings for 20 years to support her family, working night shifts that allowed her to be home when Marcus was young, but that left her exhausted and isolated from the American dream she was helping her son pursue. When Marcus finished speaking, there was a long pause before Helen responded with something that would become Marcus's guiding principle for the rest of his academic journey. "Baby," she said in her accented English, her voice carrying the weight of her own struggles and sacrifices. "Smart isn't about how fast you learn. Smart is about refusing to give up when everyone else thinks you should. Your father and I, we didn't come to this country so you could quit the first time someone tells you that you're not good enough. We came here so you could prove them wrong." Those words settled into Marcus's soul like seeds in fertile ground. He realized that his mother was right. Intelligence wasn't just about natural ability or test scores. It was about persistence, about character, about the willingness to continue fighting when the odds were stacked against you. His parents had demonstrated this kind of intelligence every day of their lives, working jobs that didn't utilize their full potential, sacrificing their own comfort for their children's future, and maintaining hope in the face of countless obstacles. Marcos threw himself into his studies with renewed vigor, but his approach was different now. Instead of simply trying to memorize information or cram for tests, he began to think strategically about how to succeed in an environment that seemed designed for students unlike himself. He formed study groups, actively sought out tutoring services, and spent every free moment in the library. He developed relationships with teaching assistants, who were closer to his age and more willing to explain concepts in different ways. He learned to advocate for himself, asking questions during office hours and requesting additional resources when he needed them. Despite his efforts, his grades remained stubbornly poor throughout his freshman year. The material seemed to build on itself in ways that made each new concept dependent on mastering previous ones, and Marcus found himself constantly playing catch-up. His grade point average hovered around 2.1, well below the university's academic standards. By the end of his first year, Marcus had failed 3 crucial courses: Introduction to Economics, College Algebra, and English Composition. These weren't just any courses. They were fundamental requirements that served as prerequisites for virtually every other class in his intended business major. The academic advisor, Mrs. Williams, called Marcus into her office during the final week of the semester. Mrs. Williams was a kindly woman in her 50s who had worked in academic advising for over 2 decades. She had seen many students struggle, and she genuinely cared about helping them succeed. But she also understood the realities of academic life and the importance of helping students make realistic decisions about their futures. "Marcus," Mrs. Williams said gently, spreading his transcript across her desk like evidence in a court case, "I think it might be time to consider taking a break from school to reassess your goals. These course failures put you on academic probation, and frankly, the pattern suggests that you might benefit from stepping away to develop your study skills, or perhaps exploring other educational options that might be a better fit for your learning style." Senora Williams meant well, but her suggestion felt like another vote of no confidence, another expert opinion that Marcus simply wasn't cut out for higher education. However, instead of discouraging him, this meeting only strengthened his resolve. Marcus looked at his transcript and saw more than just failing grades. He saw a learning curve, a set of challenges that he could overcome with the right strategy and enough determination. Marcus refused to take a break from school. Instead, he spent the summer retaking 2 of his failed courses at the local community college while working 30 hours a week at a family-owned Italian restaurant near campus. The work was physically demanding, washing dishes, cleaning tables, and handling the dinner rush that left him exhausted every night. But it taught him valuable lessons about persistence, customer service, and working as part of a team. More importantly, the money he earned helped reduce the financial burden on his parents and gave him a sense of independence and self-reliance that boosted his confidence. The community college environment was different from the university setting. The classes were smaller, the professors seemed more invested in individual student success, and the pace was more accommodating for students who needed additional time to master concepts. Marcus thrived in this environment, earning B's in both courses, and beginning to understand that his learning style required more individualized attention and practical application than the large lecture halls at Central State could provide. When Marcus returned to Central State University for his sophomore year, he was determined to apply everything he had learned about effective studying and self-advocacy. However, the academic challenges only intensified as he moved into more advanced coursework in his business major. Complex theories about market economics, financial analysis, and organizational behavior seemed designed to weed out students, exactly like Marcus. The professors spoke rapidly during lectures, assuming familiarity with concepts that Marcus was encountering for the first time. The reading assignments were dense and filled with technical terminology that required constant reference to glossaries and supplementary materials. Marcus found himself increasingly isolated from his classmates, many of whom came from families where higher education was expected rather than hoped for. They spoke casually about concepts that Marcus struggled to understand, referenced experiences and knowledge that came from educational privileges he had never enjoyed, and seemed to navigate the university system with an ease that felt almost foreign to him. Study groups often moved at a pace that left Marcus behind, and group projects frequently resulted in other students taking over responsibilities that Marcus couldn't complete at their expected level. The low point of Marcus's sophomore year came during a crucial accounting exam administered by Professor Hayes, a no-nonsense instructor who had built a reputation on maintaining high standards and failing students who couldn't meet them. The exam would determine whether Marcus could continue in the business program or would be forced to switch to a less demanding major. Marcus had studied for weeks, working with tutors, attending every review session, and spending countless hours practicing problems until his eyes burned with fatigue. Despite his preparation, the exam was a disaster. The questions seemed to test not just knowledge of accounting principles, but the kind of intuitive understanding that came from years of exposure to business concepts. Marcus found himself staring at problems that he knew he should be able to solve, watching the clock tick away precious minutes as his carefully prepared strategies crumbled under the pressure of the testing environment. When the results were posted a week later, Marcus's heart sank as he saw his grade. A 43%, well below the minimum required to continue in the business program. As he sat in Professor Hayes's office, listening to her explain why he was being dismissed from the major, Marcus felt the weight of everyone's expectations and predictions, pressing down on him like a physical force. "Marcus," Professor Hayes said, not unkindly but with a finality that chilled him to the bone, "I think it's time you faced reality. Some students have a natural aptitude for business concepts, and others don't. There's no shame in finding a different path. Have you considered switching to a less demanding major? Perhaps something in the liberal arts or social services where your people skills might be better utilized? Less demanding major?" The phrase echoed in Marcus's head as he walked across campus that day, each step feeling heavier than the last. Students rushed past him, backpacks full of textbooks, heading to classes where they belonged, where they fit, where professors didn't question their right to be there. Marcus felt like an imposter, a fraud who had somehow snuck into a place where he didn't belong, and was finally being exposed for what he really was, not college material. That night, Marcus sat in his tiny dorm room, staring at the financial aid paperwork spread across his desk like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't solve. The numbers told a stark story. He was nearly out of money, running out of time, and quickly exhausting his chances to prove that he belonged in higher education. His student loans were mounting, his parents were sacrificing more than they could afford, and his academic record was becoming a documentation of failure rather than progress. His roommate, Kevin, was a pre-med student who seemed to absorb information like a sponge, effortlessly managing a course load that would crush most students, while maintaining a social life and participating in research projects. Kevin was a good person who never intentionally made Marcus feel inferior, but his very presence was a constant reminder of what natural academic ability looked like. That night, as Marcus struggled with his emotions and doubts, Kevin tried to offer consolation that felt more painful than helpful. "Man, maybe you should listen to them," Kevin said, looking up from his organic chemistry textbook with genuine concern. "I mean, you've been struggling for 2 years now. Maybe this place just isn't the right fit." "There's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone is meant to be in college, and there are plenty of successful people who took different paths. Maybe it's just not meant to be." Kevin meant well, but his words felt like another confirmation of what everyone seemed to be thinking but were too polite to say directly. For the first time since starting college, Marcus seriously considered quitting. He drafted an email to his parents, carefully crafting words that would explain that college wasn't working out and that he'd be coming home to find a different path. He wrote about how he appreciated their sacrifices, but didn't want to waste any more of their money on an endeavor that clearly wasn't suited to his abilities. As his finger hovered over the send button, Marcus found himself thinking about more than just his own situation. He thought about his mother's calloused hands, evidence of decades spent cleaning other people's offices so that her son could have opportunities she never did. He thought about his father's tired eyes at the end of 12-hour shifts, and the way his parents' faces lit up whenever he called with any small piece of good news from school. He thought about every person who had told him he wasn't smart enough, every professor who had written him off, every classmate who had looked at him with pity. But, mostly, Marcus thought about what his mother had told him during that first devastating phone call. Smart isn't about how fast you learn. It's about refusing to give up when everyone else thinks you should. He realized that quitting now would prove everyone right, would validate every doubt and justify every low expectation. More than that, it would represent a betrayal of his parents' faith and his own deepest beliefs about what was possible through persistence and hard work. Marcus deleted the email and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would stay at Central State University, but he would fundamentally change everything about how he approached his education. If the traditional path wasn't working for him, he would create his own path. If the existing system wasn't designed for students like him, he would figure out how to succeed within that system anyway. Instead of trying to fit into the traditional mold of a successful student, Marcus began to play to his strengths and work around his weaknesses in strategic ways. He was naturally good with people, so he started seeking out professors during office hours, not just to ask for help with specific problems, but to engage in genuine conversations about the material, the field, and their own experiences in academia and business. These one-on-one conversations revealed something important. Many of his professors were brilliant researchers and practitioners, but poor teachers, especially when it came to reaching students who didn't already have strong foundations in their subjects. In individual settings, these same professors who seemed intimidating and dismissive in lecture halls were often patient, helpful, and genuinely interested in student success. Marcus discovered that his questions, which seemed naive or disruptive in large classroom settings, were actually quite insightful when posed in the right context. Marcus also began to think differently about failure and setbacks. Instead of seeing poor grades as evidence of his inadequacy or confirmation of his limitations, he started viewing them as data points, valuable information about what he needed to work on and how he could improve his approach. He kept detailed notes about his mistakes, identifying patterns in his errors and developing strategies to address specific weaknesses. This analytical approach to his own learning process began to pay dividends. Marcus discovered that he was a highly visual learner who needed to see concepts in action rather than simply reading about them in textbooks. He started creating elaborate charts, diagrams, and flowcharts that helped him understand complex relationships between ideas. He found that he learned best when he could connect theoretical concepts to real-world applications, so he began seeking out case studies, examples, and practical exercises that made abstract ideas concrete. Marcus also realized that he thrived in collaborative learning environments, where he could discuss ideas with other people and benefit from different perspectives. However, traditional study groups often moved too quickly or focused on students who were already performing well. So Marcus started his own study group, specifically designed for students who were struggling with the material and needed a more supportive, patient approach to learning. This study group became one of the most transformative experiences of Marcus's college career. What started as a small gathering of 3 or 4 struggling students gradually grew into a weekly meeting that attracted participants from across campus. Marcus discovered that his own experience with academic challenges had given him unique insights into how to break down complex concepts, explain difficult ideas in accessible language, and create an environment where students felt safe to ask questions and admit confusion. The study group also revealed something important about Marcus's natural abilities. While he might not be the fastest learner or the most naturally gifted student, he had an exceptional talent for understanding how other people learned and for finding ways to make difficult material accessible and engaging. Students who had been struggling in their classes began to improve dramatically after participating in Marcus's study sessions. Word spread, and soon professors were recommending that their struggling students attend Marcus's group. This recognition of his teaching abilities was the first hint that Marcus's struggles might actually be preparing him for something important. His experience with failure, his hard-won understanding of different learning styles, and his natural empathy for students who didn't fit traditional academic molds were developing into a unique skill set that many successful students simply didn't possess. Slowly, painfully, slowly, Marcus's grades began to improve. The progress wasn't dramatic or consistent. He still had setbacks, still failed individual assignments, still struggled with certain concepts. But the overall trajectory was upward, and more importantly, Marcus was beginning to develop confidence in his ability to overcome challenges and find solutions to problems that initially seemed insurmountable. However, improvement wasn't enough to erase the damage from his earlier failures. During his junior year, Marcus faced another major crisis when he failed a critical course in international business that was required for graduation. The course, taught by Dr. Richardson, covered complex topics related to global economics, cross-cultural management, and international trade regulations. Despite Marcus's best efforts, including regular attendance at office hours, participation in study groups, and countless hours of preparation, he simply couldn't master the material at the level required to pass the course. This failure was particularly devastating because it represented Marcus's 3rd major course failure since beginning college. According to university policy, students who failed 3 or more required courses within their major were subject to academic dismissal from the program. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in October, delivered to his dorm room like a death sentence. Dear Mr. Chun, due to your repeated academic failures in required coursework, you are hereby dismissed from the Business Administration program at Central State University. You may appeal this decision within 30 days. If you believe there are extenuating circumstances that warrant reconsideration. Marcus stared at the letter for a long time, reading and rereading the formal language that essentially meant his academic career was over. 3 years of struggle, 3 years of 18-hour days, 3 years of believing he could make it despite the odds. And it all came down to a form letter. He thought about packing his belongings and catching the next bus home. He thought about facing his parents, his community, everyone who had believed in him despite the mounting evidence that maybe he really wasn't cut out for higher education. The dismissal felt like a confirmation of every doubt that had been raised about his abilities. Dr. Peterson's early assessment seemed prophetic. Professor Hayes' suggestion that he find a less demanding major looked like wise advice he should have heeded. Even Kevin's well-meaning observation that maybe college just wasn't the right fit appeared to be an accurate evaluation of his situation. But then Marcus remembered something that Mr. Rodriguez, his high school janitor, had told him years earlier. Mr. Rodriguez had immigrated to America with nothing, worked menial jobs for decades while learning English and supporting his family, and eventually put 3 children through college, all of whom became successful professionals. One day, when Marcus was staying late to study and feeling overwhelmed by the challenges ahead, Mr. Rodriguez had shared some advice that Marcus had never forgotten. "Mijo, mister," Rodriguez had said, leaning on his mop and speaking with the wisdom of someone who had overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The difference between successful people and everyone else isn't that they don't fail. Everybody fails. The difference is that successful people fail differently. They fail forward. They use their failures as stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. They learn from their mistakes and become stronger because of them, not weaker. Fail forward. Marcus realized He had been thinking about his academic struggles all wrong. Instead of seeing his failures as roadblocks that proved he didn't belong in higher education, he needed to see them as redirects, as opportunities to find a better path forward. His failures had taught him things about persistence, about alternative learning strategies, about the importance of seeking help and building supportive communities. These were valuable lessons that many traditionally successful students never learned because they never had to. Marcus didn't accept the dismissal quietly. He decided to fight for his right to continue his education. But he knew that simply appealing the decision wouldn't be enough. He needed to demonstrate that he had learned from his failures and developed new strategies for success. He requested a meeting with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the Dean of Students, a woman known throughout the university for her no-nonsense approach to academic standards and her reputation for making tough but fair decisions. Dr. Mitchell had been at Central State University for over 15 years, serving first as a professor of business ethics before moving into administration. She had seen countless students struggle with academic challenges, and she had made difficult decisions about academic dismissals many times. However, she also believed deeply in the transformative power of higher education and was always willing to listen when students believed they deserved another chance. Marcus spent a week preparing for that meeting, not just gathering his transcripts and documentation, but reflecting deeply on what he had learned about himself, about persistence, about the kind of person he wanted to become. He created a comprehensive presentation that included not just his academic record, but evidence of his growth, his contributions to other students, success through his study group, and his detailed plan for completing his degree successfully. The meeting took place on a gray November morning in Dr. Mitchell's office, a space filled with diplomas, awards, books, and the accumulated wisdom of a 30-year career in higher education. Marcus sat across from her, his heart pounding with nervous energy as she carefully reviewed his file and the materials he had prepared. "Mr. Chun," Dr. Mitchell began, adjusting her reading glasses and speaking in the measured tone of someone accustomed to making important decisions, "your academic record speaks for itself. 3 course failures, consistently low grades during your first 2 years, and multiple semesters on academic probation. By any objective measure, Central State University appears to be a poor fit for your academic abilities and learning style. However, your request for this meeting and the materials you've prepared suggest you disagree with this assessment. I'm willing to listen to your perspective." Marcus had rehearsed this moment countless times in his head, practicing different versions of his appeal and trying to anticipate every possible question or objection. But sitting there in that office, all his prepared remarks seemed inadequate compared to the simple truth of his experience. Instead of delivering a polished presentation, he spoke from the heart about his journey, his mistakes, his learning process, and his unwavering belief that he belonged in higher education. "Dr. Mitchell," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the importance of the moment, "I won't pretend my grades are good, because they're not. I won't claim that I'm the smartest student you've ever had, because I'm probably far from it. But I will tell you this, I have learned more about perseverance, about problem solving, about resilience, about leadership, and about helping others succeed in these 3 years than many people learn in a lifetime. Every failure has taught me something valuable. Every setback has made me stronger and more determined. And every person who told me I wasn't smart enough has motivated me to prove that intelligence isn't just about test scores or grade point averages." Dr. Mitchell listened without interruption as Marcus continued, his passion and sincerity evident in every word. "I'm not asking for special treatment or lower standards. I'm asking for one more chance to show that character matters as much as capability, that determination can overcome deficiency, and that the students who struggle the most sometimes have the most to offer the world. I've created a study group that has helped dozens of struggling students improve their grades and stay in school. I've learned to advocate for myself and seek out the resources I need to succeed. I've developed study strategies and learning techniques that work for my particular learning style, and I've discovered that my struggles have given me insights and empathy that make me a better teammate, a better leader, and ultimately will make me a better business professional." Marcus pulled out a folder containing letters of support from students who had benefited from his study group, teaching assistants who had worked with him, and even one professor who had noticed his growth and development over time. "These letters aren't about my grades," he explained. They're about my character, my work ethic, and my ability to help others succeed. I believe that these qualities are just as important as academic performance, and that given one more chance, I can prove that I belong here." There was a long silence after Marcus finished speaking. Dr. Mitchell studied his face, perhaps looking for signs of delusion or false bravado, but instead seeing something that impressed her: genuine humility combined with unshakable resolve. She had heard many appeals over the years, but there was something different about Marcus's presentation. It wasn't just a plea for another chance. It was evidence of genuine growth and self. "Mr. Chun," she said finally, leaning back in a chair and considering her words carefully, "I'm going to offer you something I've never offered a dismissed student before. You can return to Central State University and continue pursuing your business degree, but it will be under strict conditions, designed to ensure your success and protect the university's academic standards." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he managed to keep his voice steady as he replied, "Dr. Mitchell, I'm ready to accept any conditions you think are appropriate. I won't let you down." Dr. Mitchell outlined the terms of Marcus's return. He would be placed on a specialized academic plan that required him to maintain a minimum 3.0 GPA in all remaining coursework, while also completing additional remedial work designed to address his deficiencies in foundational business concepts. He would meet weekly with Dr. Jennifer Santos, an academic coach who specialized in working with struggling students and non-traditional learners. He would be required to participate in supplemental instruction sessions for all his major courses and complete regular check-ins with his professors to monitor his progress. "Mr. Chun," Dr. Mishu concluded, "I'm not doing this because I think you'll succeed. I'm doing this because I think you've earned the right to succeed or fail on your own terms, with all the support we can provide. Your appeal has convinced me that you've learned from your failures and developed strategies for improvement. Now you need to prove that these insights can translate into academic success." The conditions of Marcus's return were indeed strict, but they were also exactly what he needed to succeed. The reduced course load allowed him to focus intensively on each subject without being The mandatory study sessions provided structure and accountability. Most importantly, the weekly meetings with Dr. Santos gave him access to someone who understood the unique challenges facing struggling students and knew how to help them develop effective learning strategies. Jennifer Santos was a former first-generation college student herself who had overcome significant academic and personal challenges to earn her Ph.D. in educational psychology. She specialized in working with students whose learning styles didn't match traditional academic expectations, and she understood from personal experience the psychological and emotional challenges that came with being labeled as not college material. "Marcus, Dr. Santos said during their first meeting, "We're not going to try to turn you into someone you're not. Instead, we're going to figure out how to make the Marcus you are successful in an academic environment that wasn't designed with students like you in mind. Your struggles aren't character flaws that need to be fixed. They're learning differences that need to be accommodated and leveraged." This approach was revolutionary for Marcus. Instead of constantly trying to fix his weaknesses or compensate for his deficiencies, Dr. Santos helped him identify and leverage his strengths while developing strategies to work around his challenges. Through a series of learning assessments and discussions about his most successful academic experiences, they discovered that Marcus was a highly kinesthetic learner who needed to engage with material through multiple senses and practical applications. Marcus learned best when he could move around while studying, when he could create physical models or representations of abstract concepts, and when he could engage in discussions and debates rather than passive listening. He was also a highly collaborative learner who thrived in group settings where he could both give and receive help from peers. Perhaps most importantly, he was a practical learner who understood theories best when he could see their real-world applications and consequences. Armed with this understanding of his learning style, Marcus began to approach his coursework differently. Instead of trying to memorize information through repetition, he created elaborate study guides that included charts, diagrams, role-playing exercises, and practical applications. He sought out internships and work experiences that allowed him to see business concepts in action. He formed study partnerships with other students, where they could teach each other and benefit from different perspectives on the same material. Over the following months, Marcus's academic performance improved steadily and dramatically. His grades moved from the D range to C's, then 2 B's, and eventually 2 A's in several courses. More importantly, his confidence began to return as he realized that his earlier struggles hadn't been due to lack of intelligence, but rather to a mismatch between his learning style and the traditional academic environment. But the real transformation came when Marcus began to see his struggles not as shameful secrets to hide, but as valuable experiences to share with others. His weekly study group expanded and became more sophisticated, incorporating many of the learning strategies he had developed with Dr. Santos's help. Students from across campus began attending his sessions, and Marcus discovered that his hard-won insights into alternative learning strategies were helping people who had never considered themselves struggling students. Word of Marcus's study group spread throughout the university, and professors began recommending that their students attend his sessions. Teaching assistants started collaborating with Marcus to develop supplementary materials and alternative explanations for difficult concepts. The Dean of Students' office began referring struggling students to Marcus's group as part of their academic support services. Professor Alice, the same woman who had once told Marcus to consider a less demanding major, approached him after class one day with a surprising request. Professor Hayes had been watching Marcus's transformation with growing respect and admiration, and she had noticed how effectively he helped other students understand accounting, concepts that traditionally caused problems for many learners. "Marcus," she said, her tone completely different from their previous interactions, "I have to admit, I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. But more than that, I've been watching how you help other students understand concepts that I sometimes struggle to explain effectively. You have a gift for making difficult material accessible and engaging. Would you consider becoming a peer tutor for my introductory accounting courses? The position comes with a modest stipend, but more importantly, it would give you formal recognition for the teaching skills you've developed." Marcus was stunned. The professor, who had once written him off as incapable of succeeding in business, was now asking for his help in teaching other students. It was a moment of validation that felt almost surreal, but it also represented something deeper. The recognition that his journey through failure and struggle had given him insights and abilities that traditional academic success simply couldn't provide. The tutoring position became one of the most rewarding experiences of Marcus's college career. Working with struggling students allowed him to use his hard-won knowledge about alternative learning strategies, and he discovered that his empathy and understanding made him an exceptionally effective teacher. Students who had been ready to give up on accounting began to succeed under his guidance, and their success reinforced his growing understanding that his struggles had been preparing him for something important. As Marcus entered his senior year, his grades had improved dramatically, but more importantly, he had found his purpose and his passion. He wasn't just studying business to get a degree. He was preparing to create opportunities for other people who had been written off, overlooked, or underestimated. His senior thesis focused on inclusive management practices and the untapped potential of non-traditional employees, drawing heavily on his own experiences and the insights he had gained from helping other struggling students. The thesis caught the attention of Dr. Robert Kim, a visiting professor who had spent decades in corporate leadership before transitioning to academia. Dr. Kim had built his reputation on identifying and developing unconventional talent, and he was immediately impressed not just by Marcus's research, but by the personal experiences that informed his insights. Dr. Kim said after reading the thesis, "Your research demonstrates something that many business students miss entirely. That diversity of thought and experience is not just politically correct, it's strategically essential. The perspectives you've developed through your struggles give you insights into human potential that traditionally successful students simply don't have. You understand things about motivation, resilience, and alternative paths to success that can't be learned from textbooks." Dr. Kim's endorsement opened doors that Marcus had never imagined possible. He was invited to present his thesis research at a regional business conference, where his presentation on the hidden potential of overlooked talent received enthusiastic responses from business leaders and academics alike. More importantly, several executives in attendance approached Marcus afterward, expressing interest in his ideas and asking to stay in touch. Among those business leaders was Maria Rodriguez, CEO of Rodriguez Consulting, a growing firm that specialized in helping companies improve their hiring, training, and retention practices. Maria had built her company on the belief that traditional hiring methods often overlooked the most valuable employees, and Marcus's research aligned perfectly with her philosophy and business model. "Marcus," Maria said after his presentation, her enthusiasm evident in her voice, "I've been in business for 20 years, and I can tell you that the insights in your research are exactly what companies need to hear. You've identified problems that most consultants miss entirely, and propose solutions that actually work because they're based on real experience rather than theoretical models. Have you thought about what you want to do after graduation?" Marcus had been so focused on simply surviving college and proving that he belonged there that he hadn't given much serious thought to life after graduation. But Maria's question sparked something in him. He realized that his experiences, painful as they had been, had prepared him for something important: helping other people find success in systems that weren't designed for them. The conversation with Maria led to an internship opportunity that allowed Marcus to work with real companies on real diversity and inclusion challenges. He helped develop hiring practices that identified potential rather than just credentials, training programs that accommodated different learning styles, and retention strategies that supported employees who didn't fit traditional corporate molds. The work was challenging and rewarding, and it confirmed Marcus's growing belief that his struggles had been preparing him for a career focused on helping others overcome similar obstacles. As graduation approached, Marcus felt a mixture of emotions that he couldn't quite describe. There was pride, certainly, in having overcome every obstacle and proved every doubter wrong. There was relief at finally reaching the finish line after such a long and difficult journey. But there was also a kind of disbelief that he had actually made it. The boy who had been told he wasn't college material was about to receive a bachelor's degree in business administration. The student who had failed 3 major courses was graduating with honors, having earned a 3.7 GPA in his final 2 years. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Dr. Peterson, the economics professor who had suggested Marcus consider trade school during his first semester, approached him during the final week of classes. Dr. Peterson had been watching Marcus's transformation over the years, and he felt compelled to acknowledge both his mistake and Marcus's achievement. "Marcus," Dr. Peterson said, his voice carrying a note of humility that Marcus had never heard before, "I owe you a profound apology. When I suggested you weren't cut out for higher education, I was making a judgment based on limited information and outdated assumptions about what intelligence looks like. Watching your journey has taught me something important about the difference between natural ability and developed capability, between quick learning and deep understanding. You've become one of the finest students I've had the privilege to teach, and more than that, you've made me a better educator by forcing me to question my own biases and assumptions." The apology meant more to Marcus than any grade or award could possibly have meant. It represented not just personal vindication, but proof that people could change, that first impressions didn't have to be final judgments, and that persistence could indeed overcome prejudice and preconception. Word of Marcus's story had spread throughout the university and into the broader business community during his final year. His transformation from struggling student to academic success had caught the attention of local media, and several articles had been written about his journey and his research into inclusive business practices. More significantly, his presentations and consulting work had established him as an emerging voice in discussions about talent development, alternative learning strategies, and the business case for inclusive hiring practices. The attention brought unexpected opportunities. Marcus was invited to speak at education conferences about supporting struggling students, at business seminars about recognizing diverse forms of talent, and at community events about overcoming adversity and pursuing dreams despite obstacles. Each speaking engagement reinforced his understanding that his story had significance beyond his personal experience. It was proof that the traditional metrics for measuring potential often missed the most important qualities that determined long-term success. As graduation day arrived, Marcus felt a calm confidence that would have been impossible 4 years earlier. He had survived every challenge, overcome every obstacle, and proved every doubter wrong. But he had also learned something more valuable than any degree could represent: that failure wasn't the opposite of success, but rather an essential ingredient in achieving it. His struggles had taught him about resilience, empathy, creative problem-solving, and the importance of helping others who faced similar challenges. The graduation ceremony was held on a perfect May morning, with families and friends gathering in the university's largest auditorium to celebrate the achievements of Central State University's newest graduates. Marcus's parents had driven down from their small town, their faces beaming with pride and emotion as they took their seats among hundreds of other proud family members. Helen and David Chun had sacrificed so much to give their son this opportunity, working extra shifts, postponing their own dreams, and maintaining faith even when Marcus's academic struggles made success seem unlikely. For Helen Chun, watching her son prepare to graduate represented the fulfillment of every sacrifice she had made as an immigrant mother. Every late-night cleaning offices, every dollar saved instead of spent on small luxuries, every moment of worry about whether they were making the right choices had led to this moment. She thought about the little boy who had arrived in America, speaking no English, struggled in school, but never lost his determination to succeed. David Chun felt a different kind of pride as he watched his son line up with the other graduates. As a man who had worked with his hands his entire adult life, he understood the value of persistence and hard work in ways that went beyond academic achievement. He had watched Marcus struggle, fail, get back up, and keep fighting. And he recognized in his son the same determination that had carried their family through decades of challenges in a new country. But as Marcus lined up with his fellow graduates that morning, he had no idea that his story was about to take one final, extraordinary turn. Among the families and friends in the audience was a group that seemed distinctly different from the typical graduation crowd. They were older, more formally dressed, and they carried themselves with the confidence and authority of people accustomed to making important decisions and leading large organizations. These were business leaders who had heard Marcus's story through various channels over the past year. Some had attended his presentations at conferences. Others had read articles about his research or heard about his work through professional networks. A few had worked directly with him through his internship with Rodriguez Consulting. They had come not just to witness his graduation, but to demonstrate their belief in his potential and their respect for his journey. The group included Maria Rodriguez, who had offered Marcus a full-time position as a senior consultant with her firm. There was James Patterson, CEO of Patterson Manufacturing, a major regional employer who was implementing Marcus's recommendations for inclusive hiring practices across his company. Dr. Kim was there, along with several other professors and business leaders who had been influenced by Marcus's work and inspired by his story. Also in attendance was Susan Chun, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, who served as the regional director for the Small Business Administration and had become interested in Marcus's research about supporting non-traditional entrepreneurs. There was Michael Torres, a partner at a major accounting firm who had been so impressed by Marcus's tutoring abilities that he had offered him a position developing training programs for new employees. The group also included several alumni of Central State University, who had achieved significant success in business and wanted to support a student who represented the kind of determination and character they valued in their own organization. As the graduation ceremony began, Marcus felt a sense of surreal fulfillment that went beyond personal achievement. 4 years earlier, he had walked into this same auditorium as a freshman with more hope than ability, more dreams than qualifications, more determination than preparation. He had been dismissed, written off, and counted out more times than he could remember. But he had also discovered something that couldn't be taught in any classroom: the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations, and the importance of using personal struggles as preparation for helping others. When the time came for graduates to receive their diplomas, Marcus's name was called, along with more than 300 other students. As he walked across the stage, shaking hands with Dr. Mitchell, who had given him that crucial second chance, he felt the weight of the moment settling into his consciousness. This wasn't just about receiving a piece of paper that certified his completion of degree requirements. It was about proving that persistence could overcome any obstacle, that character could compensate for any deficiency, and that the people who struggle the most often have the most to offer the world. As Marcus reached for his diploma, Dr. Mitchell leaned in and said something that only he could hear. "Mr. Chun, this university is better because you refused to give up." Thank you for teaching us all something important about potential and persistence." But as Marcus turned to face the audience, diploma in hand, something extraordinary and completely unexpected happened. Maria Rodriguez, sitting in the third row, slowly rose to her feet. Then James Patterson stood up, followed by Dr. Kim, followed by Susan Chun and Michael Torres and the other business leaders who had come to witness this moment. What started as a small group of supporters quickly spread throughout the auditorium as other attendees, inspired by the example of these respected leaders and sensing that something significant was happening, began to rise from their seats as well. Parents, siblings, friends, faculty members, and even other graduates who had finished receiving their diplomas joined the standing recognition. By the time Marcus fully turned to face the audience, nearly 100 people were standing in recognition of his achievement. But this wasn't just applause for academic success. It was recognition of something much deeper and more meaningful. These business leaders and community members were standing for every person who had been underestimated, every student who had struggled against a system that wasn't designed for them, every individual who had been told they weren't smart enough, or good enough, or worthy enough to pursue their dreams. The applause was thunderous and sustained, lasting for what felt like several minutes, but was probably only 30 or 40 seconds. But it was the sight of those standing figures that brought tears to Marcus's eyes and created a moment he would remember for the rest of his life. 4 years earlier, he had been a struggling freshman that professors wanted to dismiss and advisors encouraged to quit. Now, leaders from across the business community were literally standing up for him, demonstrating their belief in his potential and their respect for his journey. As Marcus looked out at that sea of standing figures, he thought about everyone who had supported him along the way. His parents who had sacrificed everything for his education, Dr. Mitchell who had given him a second chance when university policy suggested he should be dismissed, Dr. Santos who had helped him understand his learning style and develop effective strategies, and even the professors like Dr. Peterson who had challenged him and then acknowledged their initial But mostly, he thought about all the other students who were still struggling, still being told they weren't smart enough, still fighting to prove that they belonged in higher education. He thought about future students who would face the same challenges he had encountered, who would be discouraged by professors, underestimated by classmates, and tempted to give up when the obstacles seemed insurmountable. The standing ovation represented more than personal recognition. It was a powerful statement about the value of persistence, the importance of inclusive education, and the potential that exists in every person who refuses to accept other people's limitations. It was proof that success could be measured in more ways than grade point averages and test scores, and that some of the most valuable contributions to society came from people who had overcome the greatest challenges. When the crowd finally settled back into their seats, Marcus walked off the stage, not just as a graduate, but as living proof that the American dream was still accessible to those willing to work for it, that higher education could indeed be transformative for students from all backgrounds, and that the longest journey often led to the sweetest victory. After the ceremony, Marcus was surrounded by well-wishers, family members, and business leaders who wanted to congratulate him personally and discuss future opportunities. The conversations continued for hours, with people sharing their own stories of overcoming obstacles, expressing admiration for his persistence, and offering various forms of support for his career goals. Maria Rodriguez pulled him aside to finalize the details of his employment offer with Rodriguez Consulting. "Marcus," she said with evident excitement, "we want you to lead our new division focused on inclusive talent development. Your insights are exactly what our clients need, and your story is proof that our approach works. You'll be working with companies across the region to help them identify and develop unconventional talent." Dr. Mitchell also sought him out for a private conversation. "Marcus," she said, "I want you to know that giving you that second chance was one of the best decisions I've made as dean. You've not only succeeded academically, but you've helped transform how we think about supporting struggling students. Your study group model has been adopted by other universities. Your research has influenced policy discussions at the state level, and your example has inspired countless other students who were ready to give up." But perhaps the most meaningful conversation came from his parents, as they stood together outside the auditorium, still processing the emotion of the day. Helen Chun took her son's hands in hers and spoke words that captured the essence of their immigrant journey and their family's values. "Son," she said, her voice thick with emotion and pride. "We always knew you were special, not because of your grades or your achievements, but because of your heart. Watching you refuse to give up, watching you help other students succeed, watching you turn every setback into a preparation for comeback that's made us prouder than any diploma ever could. You didn't just graduate from college today. You proved that dreams are possible when you refuse to stop believing in them." David Chun, still a man of few words, despite the momentous occasion, simply put his arm around his son's shoulders and said, "You did it, boy. Against all the odds, through all the challenges, you really did it. And now you're going to help other people do it too." As the day wound down and families began to disperse, Marcus found himself standing in the same spot where he had posed for photos as a nervous freshman 4 years earlier. The campus looked the same, but everything else had changed. He was no longer the struggling student who professors doubted and advisors encouraged to quit. He was a graduate with multiple job offers, research recognition, and the respect of business leaders across the region. More importantly, Marcus had discovered his life's purpose, helping other people overcome the same kinds of obstacles he had faced. His struggles hadn't been meaningless suffering. They had been preparation for a career focused on creating opportunities for people who didn't fit traditional molds, who learned differently, who needed different kinds of support to reach their potential. As Marcus walked across campus for the last time as a student, he thought about all the future students who would face similar challenges to those he had encountered. He thought about the professors who would doubt them, the classmates who would underestimate them, and the systems that would seem designed to exclude them. But he also thought about the mentors who would believe in them, the opportunities that would emerge from struggle, and the victories that would make every setback worthwhile. The story of Marcus Chun was really the story of anyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough to pursue their dreams. It was proof that labels don't define potential, that failure doesn't determine destiny, and that sometimes the people everyone counts out become the ones everyone stands up for. In the months and years that followed graduation, Marcus's story continued to spread and inspire others. He became a sought-after speaker at education conferences, business seminars, and community events. His work with Rodriguez Consulting helped dozens of companies improve their hiring practices and better support employees who didn't fit traditional corporate molds. He established mentorship programs for struggling students and worked with universities to develop more inclusive support services. Marcus also maintained his connection to Central State University, serving as a guest lecturer, mentor for current students, and member of the Alumni Advisory Board. He established a scholarship fund specifically for first-generation college students and students who were struggling academically, but showed evidence of character, determination, and potential for growth. Perhaps, most importantly, Marcus never forgot the lessons that failure had taught him. He understood that his success wasn't just personal achievement, it was a responsibility to help others who were still fighting their own battles against low expectations, systemic barriers, and their own self-doubt. Years later, when Marcus was invited back to Central State as the commencement speaker for a new class of graduates, he stood at the same podium where his own graduation had been announced. Looking out at the audience, he saw faces that reminded him of his younger self, uncertain, hopeful, struggling, and determined. Today, Marcus told the graduating class, "I want to talk specifically to those of you who feel like you don't belong here, who have been told you're not smart enough, who have failed and wondered if you should give up. I want to tell you that your struggles are not weaknesses to be hidden. They are strengths to be developed. I want to tell you that the education you've received here isn't just about what you've learned from textbooks. It's about what you've learned about yourself, about persistence, about the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations." As Marcus continued his speech, he noticed several business leaders in the audience beginning to stand, just as they had at his own graduation years earlier. This time, though, Marcus understood that their standing wasn't just about recognizing individual achievement. It was about celebrating the power of human potential, when it's nurtured and supported rather than dismissed and discouraged. The speech became one of the most widely shared commencement addresses in Central State University's history, and Marcus's message resonated far beyond that single graduation ceremony. His story became a symbol of hope for struggling students, A reminder to educators about the importance of believing in all students, and a powerful example of how personal struggles could be transformed into professional purpose. Marcus Toon's journey from struggling freshman to celebrated graduate to successful business consultant and educational advocate proved that failure isn't the end of the story. It's often just the beginning of the most important chapter. His example continues to inspire students, educators, and business leaders who believe that everyone deserves the chance to prove that they're more than other people's expectations. In a world that too often judges potential by performance, that confuses speed with intelligence, and that mistakes struggle for inability, Marcus Chun's story stands as powerful evidence that the most successful people are often those who have learned to fail forward, to persist through discouragement, and to turn every setback into a setup for an even greater comeback. The applause that filled the auditorium on Marcus's graduation day wasn't just celebrating one student's achievement. It was celebrating the triumph of hope over doubt, of persistence over prejudice, and of potential over perception. It was proof that when we stop writing people off and start believing in their ability to grow, extraordinary things become possible. And that's a lesson worth standing up for.